something I prepared. So it's not a technical talk. It's more of sharing my experiences in using Rails for the past couple of years. So why do I say that? Because I was thinking, is Rails still relevant as a tech platform or as a stack for 2017? And I want to share my experience and at least my thought process on why I decided to stick with Rails with one of our products back in 2015. So let's. Right. Okay, so to give you a short background of myself, I'm a software developer. I've been working professionally for the past 10 years. And my experience is primarily on startups. And now I'm a product engineering manager for AMI Philippines, and our product is a payment acceptance platform. I also lead the AWS user group. So if you're into AWS, I also invite you to come to our meetup tomorrow. Tech type, so that's a cross-sell. Okay, so aside from my professional background, I also have my Ruby background. So I think it makes sense to give my Ruby background because this is a Ruby users group meetup. I wrote a couple of gems earlier this decade called Chain Selects and Headshot. Both are defunct now, so no sense of checking them out. I wrote them for Rails 2.x, so Rails is in 5.x version now, so of course they're not going to work anyway. I consider myself more of a Rails enthusiast, so I really like Rails as a framework. Coming way back in 2006, so coming from my background in PHP, for some reason I discovered David Hanson's video about creating a blog in 15 minutes. So I think it's a big pivotal moment for me, because back then PHP was like the rage for web application development, so the LAMP stack, right? And during that time, the frameworks are not that popular for some reason. And when Rails came, all of a sudden you had this framework revolution. And I still have that passion with Rails. I feel like during that time, it opened me to it's like a eureka moment for me. And actually, I did participated in the PageRug meetups way back 2007, 2008. I can see some of the veterans here still in the group. Now that I think about it, 2007 is like 10 years ago, so it's still I'm amazed. I mean, the group is still here, and we get to talk about Ruby and Rails. So what do I do in the company? So I was thinking of an image to represent what do I do, and I find this. I saw it in Facebook a couple of years back, and I also remember this panel because essentially it captures everything IT leaders or IT managers do, right? So of course, if you show your product to customers, it seems like everything is working, but at the back of it, you have people trying to make sure that it works, and that's an amazing thing about in IT. So there are a lot of challenges, and sometimes as a professional, you need to really adjust to make sure that your commitment is there. Another panel here that I really like is this one. So, business and product people, they always expect you to come up with magic, to come up with your platform, be it a multi-tenancy platform. For example, for us, like a couple of years ago, what we're building was supposed to be for our company only. Then all of a sudden, 2 years after, apparently we have a requirement for multi-tenancy. So business will come to us and say, okay, is the multi-tenancy ready? After 1 week of discussing the requirements. So, and sometimes it's a funny thing. It's a funny thing. Okay, so on a more serious note, so what do? I lead development teams, I manage people and stakeholders, do high-level software architecture, but I can still code probably 10 to 20% of my time. So I still make sure that I can still code. So I think it's very important for me. And our tech stacks are Node.js for our payment gateway platforms, and of course Ruby on Rails. So I'm gonna focus on why I chose Ruby on Rails as a platform for our payment management web software called PayMaya Manager. So back in 2015, so this is the time I joined Voyager Innovation / PayMaya, and during the time I didn't have a team, so I came in as a senior developer. I have one developer and one tester to work with me for a project. And when you work in payments, so I came in without any payments background. I came in as a user or a consumer of payment platforms. So I have a lot of experiences working with PayPal. I'm familiar with Stripe back then, but I do not know what happens underneath, right? So for payments, usually you think it's like the tip of the iceberg. You just see that, okay, you pass this card number, or you redirect to this page, and all of a sudden something magical will happen. And then the payment gets processed, and yes, you can perform your payment, post-payment business logic. Then I was surprised with the level of domain knowledge that you need to gain in order to work on payment platforms. So, so when you talk about security, compliance, all these things I do not know before I came in for PayMaya, then I was in a rush to learn all of these things. So aside from the security, also have things like PCI DSS. So this is a payment card industry, data security standards. So essentially Visa, MasterCard, they have this really detailed set of procedures to make sure that card data is secure for issuers and acquirers. At the same time, we also have the BSP. So PayMaya is regulated by the Bangko Sentral of the Philippines. So I was also surprised that you need to do a lot of things. So for instance, part of PayMaya's business is to issue Visa cards. So apparently, I didn't know beforehand that if you're in the issuing business, you need to have your data or your customers' data on soil in the Philippines. So it's something new for me. So I was thinking that, oh, okay, just dump everything to the cloud. So it doesn't work like that. So we need to make sure that we have this hybrid on-premises and cloud architecture to satisfy BSP's requirement. You also have, nowadays you also have the data privacy compliance, so Data Privacy Act. That's another thing that you need to manage. So you need to gain all of this domain knowledge in order to work with payments. So, so going back, aside from the development, I also need to manage product and business expectations. So again, coming from the like a normal developer perspective, how do I? My question to myself, given the requirements are, how do I develop this web application, given that I only have like a developer, a tester, and myself to come up with this really complex requirement. So the first thing that came into my mind is, should I use Node.js? Because during that time, our company uses Node.js as the primary or the de facto platform. Should I use a client MVC framework? So as you guys know, there are architectures that favor like client-side MVC. So you write the UI on the client side, and your backend becomes just like the API. So those are the things that I ask myself with the requirements. So I try to look at the Node.js ecosystem, and essentially what happens is that I overloaded. So this was back in 2015, early 2016, and there are a lot of choices, essentially. So given that there are a lot of choices sorry, I'm not bashing Node.js, so I still use it, but I'm just saying that because there are a lot of choices, and given the complexity of requirements and the compliance, security, all these things to manage, I need a tool that I can safely say that yes, we can deliver on time, given the compliance and security requirements. At the same time, it gives me peace of mind. So I can just use like a random JS framework that came out of NPM 2 days ago and say, yes, I found the framework to solve our problem. So I don't think it works like that. So of course, aside from the frameworks, there are also a couple of things, right? There are different versions of JavaScript. So during the time, I was thinking, okay, should I use ES5, like the standard JavaScript? Yeah. We also have the newer versions, like ES6, 2016. What framework specifically to use? So there's also like a Rails wannabe in Node.js called Sales.js. So it's no-brainer where they got their name from. But unfortunately, coming from a Rails background, I find it like it lacks a lot of things. Like doesn't have a built-in support for migrations, doesn't have a solid ORM. So it has its own ORM, but it's not functioning as it should. So testing is important. So there are a lot of frameworks that you can use, but I feel like we need something integrated to the framework to make things easier. And of course, taking into account that I have a small team, I think I need something that has a certain level of standard. So at the back of my mind, given my Rails background, obviously I want to use Rails, right? But since when I came into the company, I was still at the company back then, and Node.js is really strong in the company and in the community, even in the community, I asked myself, would it still make sense to use Rails? Okay, so even though I have a background in Rails, I also came to the point that I asked myself if it makes sense to use it. And all of my answers were given by the heavens, because in July 2016, DHH published this article in his blog called The Rails Doctrine. So it kind of, in a way, it's good to read it during that time, because it kind of answered some of the questions that I have. Because I can't just choose a framework just to satisfy an immediate requirement. So I need to make sure that the tech will be able to answer the business requirements for the next 5 years. So a certain level of maturity and what do you call this, stability are needed. So I felt like I couldn't find it at the time in Node.js. So I trusted my gut, which is to use Rails, which is something I'm really comfortable with. So as expected, during the time, Rails is not cool anymore. So I realized 2006, 2004, when Rails was first released to the public, it's already 13 years ago. So it's a long time. So it's not the trendiest anymore. I think a lot of the things that Rails made popular are kind of mainstream already. So although it's not cool, would you say it's not cool? But the key tenets like DRM and DRY and COC still hold true. So those two principles I think are quite important. And I think in terms of influence, you can see it in frameworks and tech stacks. The things that made the things Rails made popular. So what are the insights? So when I was younger, when Rails started, I felt like it's like a counterculture, and it's cool, it's the latest and the greatest. Well, back then, that's my key factors for choosing the tech. So if it's cool and it's new, I think that's good. Then Rails evolved throughout the years, and I also matured throughout the years. And sometimes you also need to think about the stability and predictability. And aside from that, also the fit for the problem you're trying to solve. So in our case, I think Node.js makes sense for our payment acceptance for our API platforms, because in payment processing you do a lot of waiting. So the non-blocking I/O model of Node.js makes sense. Whereas in web application development, I think I can't find a really good match for Rails. And given for a small team to produce work that needs to be developed by a larger team, I think that's leverage, and I think Rails provided that. So I decided to push through with Rails for our development. And at the same time, I think it provides a lot of sensible defaults, especially for security. And there's one thing I noticed, that since we follow a lot of these guidelines and security standards, a lot of the things that come out of the box in Rails are quite fit for our security requirements. Whereas one of the things I found out in the Node.js environment is that if you use the wrong framework, you might end up doing a lot of things to secure your platform. And if you have a small team, that's too much to ask. That's too much to ask. So having that sensible defaults configuration is really important. And again, Rails it has been there for quite some time, and similarly to to myself, I matured. Even the community here in our group has been there for quite some time, and of course it also matured throughout the years. Okay, so moving forward, so essentially I can summarize the things that I learned in designing Rails nowadays. As your career progress, it's good to see the end goal and not just see tech as like tools that we feel passionate about. Sometimes it's good to see like the end goal of the company or the business. So at the same time, you need to consider your team, especially if you have a lot of requirements aside from product and business requirements. You have things like compliance and security. So that needs to be factored in deciding a tech stack. So I still think that Rails is a viable tool or a choice for web applications. And even for client-side applications that use a JavaScript and VC framework, like probably React. So something we're trying to explore now, having this combo of React with Rails as a backend. So I think it's still relevant. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. Okay.